Gentlemen.
Hey guys, welcome back. Nerdy Gentleman here, and I wanted to get a video out today talking about the 3.22 patch, the structural salvage, the current iteration of it, and what I see for future iterations of this video, or of this gameplay loop in StarCitizen. So if you want to see that, stick around. If not, if you don't want to do anything with spoilers, then click away from this video now. Click away, and if you're still here, I'm going to assume that you want to be here. So, as mentioned, 3.22 is in first wave PTU. There's a lot of videos coming out onto YouTube showing some different gameplay loops with structural salvage, the new implementation of salvaging. I guess we're at 2.0 at this point in time. And there's some good information that's coming out there, and there's a lot of commentary on what's going on in the chats, so both on Reddit and on YouTube, about the function. There's some complaints, there's some cheers, some good winning points and everything like that. But I wanted to kind of touch base and kind of give a bigger overview. So this is going to be a bit theory crafting and future crafting and things that they can do to go through and help improve this, and what we have in place right now and the things that are going to be causing some issues, if you will. So starting off right now in 3.21.1, in-game right now, not in the PTU, we have our current structural salvage only consists of scraping. So you got hull scraping that you can do. And I'm going to go through and throw, we have our spreadsheet up on here. So this is going to be like spreadsheet citizen to go through and kind of get some of these numbers out. But we look at Vulture and Reclaimer, our two ships. And we have cinch, abrade, and trawler scraping heads that we can do on those ships, right? So right now, whenever you scrape, you get 7,699 AUEC per SCU. Whenever you sell that to a TDD, you can also sell that to some different locations like Crew L4, Brewer's Breaker Yard. You get typically less money for that on there. But whenever you're doing that, you're basically 7,700 AUEC per SCU, and you have a range, right? So I put on screen here, I have the cinch, the abrade, and the trawler scraping heads, and then the time per SCU, so the time it takes to create an SCU for each of those, right? 48 seconds for the cinch, 30 seconds for the abrade, 35 seconds for the trawler, and then for the reclaimer, I want to say it's close to about 28 to 30 seconds for the reclaimer as well to go through in per SCU creation. But whenever you actually equal that out, realistically that comes out to about 10k per minute for scraping that you can earn, 10,000 AUEC per minute for just doing the scraping side of it. Whenever you go through and take into consideration, right now in game they introduced the functionality to where you have to create a box in game as well for the RMC. So scraping isn't just scraping; it fills up the one SCU box, ejects out the SCU box of that, and then we'll go through and create a box to store the next bit of RMC in, and then kick that out. So it kicks out from, instead of being 35 seconds for the trawler, it actually adds about 5 or 8 seconds to the process for it. So then it comes to about 45 seconds per SCU box to get created. And honestly, I have no issues with it. I think this is a really good gameplay loop. I think they do have a really good process for it at this point in time for the gameplay loop, and it feels to where it's rewarding enough and involved enough to where it's not oversimplified, and also has a good reward for the outcome of it, for the time and energy investment put into it versus the outcome of it. I think that it's really well done. The one thing in game right now is that you have basically you can mine or harvest 2 SCU boxes, and then you have to swap over and hop in the back and go through and move it. That is changing with 3.22. Some of the different changes that they've put into 3.22 are a buffer for the amount of stored RMC or CMC that you can have in the system before you have to eject it. And I believe that's 14 SCU for the Vulture and 350, if I'm not mistaken, SCU for the Reclaimer. So that is a big boost forward. So right now in game, good earnings revenue, good gameplay loop, and I think it does really well. Now moving into our next step, which is the information that is in 3.22 in the PTU. And that's the munching aspect of it, which the munching aspect of it is, first implementation is extremely overpowered. It's extremely too profitable, and for good reason, right? They're doing this so people go into this game loop to test it out so they can get more data. That's all they're doing at this point in time, is trying to get data to figure out what needs to be adjusted and where. So initial implementation right now, we have munching is whenever you munch the hull of a ship, it is construction material, or CMC, construction material composite. I'm not sure which one it's going to be, but one of the videos that I watched had an approximation for the times they were taking apart the hammerhead in the reclaimer. The fracturing time was approximately 40 seconds to go through and break apart the reclaimer, or I'm sorry, break apart the hammerhead in the reclaimer. And then the second phase was the disintegration time, which was 40 to 60 seconds to disintegrate the hammerhead. And then they got 418 SCU total quantity of CMC, which is ridiculous, because that comes out to 5.225 million AUEC credits for essentially 2 or 3 minutes worth of work, right? So there's no way that that's going to be like the gameplay loop is, yeah, 5 million credits for 2 minutes worth of work in the game. I think that obviously they're doing this with this first introduction of the costs and everything like that to go through and, like I said, get the testing out there and move that along. But outside of that, some of the issues that have come up with it is it's too simple. It's basically pushing a button. There's no skill involved. And the quantities are extreme, right? They're just on that ridiculous amount of level to where, you know, it's the overpowered. Like, everybody's going to be munching. Everybody's going to be doing munching in the game because they're going to go through and say that's the easiest game loop to earn money in. And I agree with that. I think that is going to be the outcome. But for the initial phases of it, and this might all change with each subsequent wave of PTU, they might go through and do some adjustments up and adjust the pricing down and up for munching or scraping or vice versa. But this is where we kind of go into that next side of it. It's like, what can happen with it? What are the issues that are going on with it? The big parts is that the issues that people are saying in the comment section is this is too simple. There's no skill involved with this. It's basically pushing a hotkey, and that's going to initiate each phase of the process between disintegration or fracturing and disintegration, and then you're basically just going back to stack all the work. There's no skill involved with it. But also we have to look back to the first integrations of mining into the game, and I want to do a lot of comparisons between mining and structural salvage in the development of the game cycle, because I think that's going to be one of those key takeaway parts is what needs to happen with it. I agree that the costs are ridiculous, exorbitant amounts of money that can be earned with munching, and I don't think that that's going to be what's going to end up happening whenever it gets into game. And I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of people that are going to be really upset because there's going to be changes that are going to happen. There's going to be changes in pricing and quantity that comes out with this, and I think a lot of people are going to be upset about that. But I'm trying to go through and theory craft everything out on here. So what would I do? What would the nerdy gentleman do to go through and increase the overall work involved, the good feeling given from the gameplay loop? I would do two things. One, I would keep scraping where it is right now, where it's at, because I feel like it's a good gameplay loop, and it's a good value for energy input trade, right? And the second part of that is because we also need to have a constant. We need to know what to compare it against. If we change everything all the time, then we're not going to be able to really go through and say, yeah, well, that feels better now because we did this. And secondly is that munching and scraping are a part of salvage. That is should be considered like a part of the salvage gameplay loop. Not one is more powerful than the other. Not one is this, not one is that, because you want to be able to go through and have it to where you go in and to complete the salvage contracts, you need to do scraping and munching, right? You need to, that's both a part of it. You wouldn't go through and in mining, you can't go through and just be like, I'm just going to harvest the rocks. No, you actually have to break them up. You have to go through the process of the skill level of it, of getting it to where you're breaking them up, you're breaking them down into smaller quantities, you're going through and siphoning through which ones you don't want to go through and pick up, and then you're going through and extracting the materials out. That's the process for that. You need to have that same level of gameplay loop in it, because right now it's not a gameplay loop. It is pushing a button. You go out to a site and you push a button and you split apart the site, and then you come back in and you sell. Like that's not a gameplay loop. That's pushing a button with extra steps, essentially. So, one of the things that I propose is that whenever you go through and for the munching side of it specifically, is one, the values should be down closer to about 3,000 to 3,500 AUEC per SCU. Right off the bat, that goes through and knocks it. So if you got the same amount of SCU quantity off that hammerhead, that would go through and put it to where it's only worth 1.46 million versus 5.225 million, right? So 1.4 million versus 5.2 million, huge difference in value. But the other side of it is the breakdown of it in between, right? So I have it to where I have it set for fracturing time, disintegration time, SCU quantity, and profit, as you can see on my little screen over there on my little spreadsheet, my little table down here. Fracturing time I actually think is about right. I would say that should have fluctuations in it, but for the total time to go through and fracture, and I'm basing this off of the mining gameplay loop, which I think the mining gameplay loop is in a really good state, so I'm using that for numbers. Mining gameplay loop, it takes between 30 seconds and 2 minutes to go through and break a rock if it's not on the extreme ends of the spectrum for fracturing that rock, right? If it's not on the impossible level that's going to go through and like you're inching up the scale every second or two, it should take between 30 seconds to 2 minutes to go through and do the initial fracture on a rock. And then the subsequent fractures, that will go through and work out time. But that's where I'm thinking on the munching side of it. The overall fracture time, I think, approximately about the right amount of time on there. The disintegration time, though, is also that 40 to 60 seconds, and I think that's where some of the issue comes in, and then the overall quantity. Now, how would Nerdy fix this? I would go through and fix it one of three ways. First implementation is that you need to go through and actually, first thoughts is requiring not having to have the either components removed, the weapons removed, the a certain percentage of the hull scraped before you can munch, something like that, to where you're putting in place steps that have to happen before it can be fractured, and whatever that is. Honestly, you make more money if you go through and do the scraping first, then the munching, but that's only if you only have one to do. If you can go through and just munch through 5, 6, 7 different ships, then that's going to be the fastest gameplay loop, right? That's going to be the fastest money earning without having to do the scraping. But if you were to implement something to where it says the hull has to be scraped up to 50% or 60% scraped before you can, fracture the ship and disintegrate it and munch the ship, that would be something that would make it to where there is a forced gameplay loop in that side of it. Some people might not like that, but it's going to make it to where you don't just click a button and you have 2 million credits. The second part of it is by having something to where you're saying a second or a skill-based phase to it. It's not a guaranteed 418 SCU for a hammerhead, right? You have to go through and be able to have loss. In the mining gameplay loop, if you were to go through and have put too much power into a rock, right, you could blow up the rock. If it's a 30-ton rock or 300-ton rock or whatever, I think 30-ton. If it's a 30-ton rock and you put too much power into it, you might still get something out of it if it explodes. If you put way too much power into it, it's going to dramatically explode and you possibly could die, right? That's one of the inherent risks in that. If it's a little bit too much, you could lose some of the mass of the rock because it's just blown off into stuff that you can't get. And it can also, and this is, I know everybody says it's not proven that it is that, but it does seem to be that where you'll get more of a spread between the good stuff that you're looking for. If you're trying to go through a rock to get gold and bexelite and terranite and everything like that, and you're going into the red and it's and you're losing some of that stuff, then that rock is less valuable. And you should have something along those same lines in the munching aspect of the structural salvage, right? There needs to be a process for, in my head, the ideal process for this is to go through and get out to a ship, right? This is granted much further into the future. But if you were to go through and say, what is the total salvage functionality look like? What does the salvage gameplay loop look like, right? Grab a contract, fly out to location. If you're running solo, it's going to be get out to the location, remove the modules that need to be removed, because some of them, they should absolutely be valuable. They should be worth the value to go through and scrap them or remove them, right? And that whether that's the shielding and the cooling and the quantum drives and stuff like that, if they're in good repair, you should be able to pull them onto the ship, and they should be valuable. In my head, I think in the next patch we're supposed to be getting, I don't know if it's 3.22, but I think in the next patch we're supposed to be getting the boxes to where you can go through and stack stuff into boxes, right? So if I go through off of a smaller ship and pull off the cooling module and the jump drive and the shielding module and all that stuff, I should be able to go through and put those into a box that can go through and be set on my ship, whether I'm in the Vulture, whether I have a buddy that brings a ship out to go through and stack stuff in there, but those should be stacked so that they're not loose on the ship. Also, that should include weapons, right? You should be able to go through and stack weapons in there. Not just turrets, but also missiles, because if you're going to go salvage a ship, you need to be able to go through and pull off all the stuff that's explosive, like missiles or fuel. That leads me to my next step. You should go through and have to remove, whether through having somebody come out in a Starfarer to go through and siphon off the fuel from it, or you should be able to vent that fuel, both the quantum fuel and the hydrogen fuel, into space. And it should have a process for going through like, all right, it's fully vented out. Because if you go through and go into the next step of it, which is the fracturing time, which I do not think should be something that should be clicking a button, but instead should be a cutting laser that can go through and, cut the ship apart. And that way you can go through and you are able to go through and cut out quantities or sizes of the ship that should be able to fit into the Vulture between the forks, or into the reclaimer in the claw, right? So cut out the sizes that you need, and with those cuts, being able to go through and you can possibly damage parts or not get good cuts, or have the big support beams and major stuff that's going on there, or armor that's going to go through and adjust how long it takes to cut, and or how much power you need to put into cutting that ship up, right? There might be stuff to where if you're putting too much heat into your beam whenever you're cutting or dissecting apart a ship, that should go through and put extra damage into maybe that material, so you don't get as much CMC off of that. If you put it to where the cuts are too big and they can't fit between your sections, then it's going to take longer for to disintegrate it, to extract the materials from it. Once you go through and have the ship cut, and you've removed all the fuel and everything like that, it's all cut and dissected apart, then you should go into the spot of the disintegration beam at this point in time. But that should be something to where you're actually utilizing those functions, like with the claw. I think the beam actually does work really well, though, in the sense that especially for the Vulture, it looks really good. I know the claw has the functionality and people want to have that, and they're upset that the claw doesn't actually do claw things. But the whole system for that to be put in place, for like it actually to be physicalized and go through the munchers inside the claw, or like the little shredding machine inside the claw, is a lot. For the Vulture, it has that little array there in the background. You were able to see it just a few seconds ago, to where you can see between the forks and it's going through and dissecting it up. I'm okay with that. It works well, and it works well for the gameplay loop. However, there needs to be a skill involved with that as well, right? Whenever you're extracting materials in mining, and you're going through and using the extraction head, you just click a button on there and it absorbs the stuff in. So it's not really a skill-based side on there, but you are going through and filtering out, like physically looking at the stuff and saying, okay, this one is, oh nice, this is 100% gold, or oh crap, no, this one's only like 3% gold. It's a total of 2 SCU and it's only 3% gold. Most of it's inert. I'm not going to pick that one up. So it's not necessarily skill on that, but it is critical thinking or logic that you use on that side of it. And that gameplay loop should also move over into the salvaging, the munching side of it as well. Because depending on your cuts, depending on the materials that are available in that part of the ship, right? Certain ships are going to have more valuable materials in certain sections than others. And whether that's because, hey, that's mostly a living area inside of it, so it's mostly air. There's nothing except for the outside exterior shell, some base structural like rafting and stuff like that that goes inside of it to go through and give more structure to it. But then the most of it on the inside is empty. So it's not going to be as valuable as the section that's got the engines in it, because that's going to be highly more valuable. That same logic should be put into place whenever you're looking at it for the extraction part of it. Right now, the disintegration time, right? So you should go through it and say, with your tractor beam, grab the stuff, move it over to the side and say, oh, this is the engine component area, the engine bay area, or the, you know, where all of the piping or wiring goes through. Sweet. That is actually of more value. It's more density in value. So it should be worth X amount of SCU of value for it, versus this gigantic section over here that happens to be a wing that's mostly hollow. Nothing's in there. You've already removed the weaponry and the components off the side of it, so there's nothing in there, so it's going to be worth less value. It's going to be basically like the inert material in mining, right? So that logic, I think, helps in the sense of just like making it to where it's a more fulfilling gameplay loop. And I think that'll be eventually something that goes along those lines. And the reason for that is because they've put 4 or 5 years into mining up to this point in time, and it's actually gotten to a spot to where it's really fun, it's really good, and it has enough challenge to it to go through and make it to where the gameplay is not monotonous and boring. There actually is some skill involved with it, which is great. It feels really good. And it's got good earnings potential off of there. Now, another thing that we can look at in the future might be something actually bringing in with the Expanse and other ships for refining. Might be able to go through and further refine some of this salvage or everything else into a further refined spot. But that's for another video on there. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that my thought process for next iterations into the game is going to look better, or it's going to look more like that? Do you think they're going to follow into that kind of footsteps of the mining gameplay loop, to where you have those multiple sections for it? Because that, for me, is one of those big sides of, it's not just click a button and forget it. It's something to where you actually do need to have some skill involved with there. Right now, the gameplay loop is not so much skill-based. It's, you go through and it's a chill, laid-back gameplay loop, and I appreciate that. The time sink involved is going through and getting up and moving back to the Vulture or to the Reclaimer and playing Cargo Monkey and moving stuff around. So there's that level of, you know, one of the reasons why there's a time sink into it. So that's actually going to wrap it up for me on this video, guys. I know that we've covered a lot of stuff on here and did a lot of theory crafting and everything on there, but I really, one of my favorite things is actually seeing what you guys think about these theory crafting sessions, these theory crafting videos down in the comments. I just always appreciate the conversations that we have down there. Thank you guys so much for helping me to go through and get to 1,000 subscribers. It is very, very welcomed. I very much appreciate that as well. And if you guys want to see more theory crafting videos, make sure you guys click here where we actually talked about the Drake Super Freighter speculator video, speculating on the new Drake Super Freighter that is rumored to be in the pipeline somewhere down the line. So until next time, guys, this is Dream Reaver 23. Until next time, guys, this is the Nerdy Gentleman. Until next time, guys, this is the Nerdy Gentleman reminding you to game happy. I love you all. Thanks so much for being here, and I will see you all later. Bye, guys.
Gentlemen.